In 1996, a deadly virus spreads across the globe, wiping out almost all of humanity. People believe a group called the 12 Monkeys is responsible for it. By the year 2035, the few survivors live underground while animals roam the surface of the earth. A boy named James has a recurring dream of seeing a man get shot at an airport while a blonde woman rushes to help. This is just a dream, and James is an adult living in a prison in 2035. He wakes up when the prison warden calls his name. His friend, Jose, in the next cell, tells him that he's been selected to go outside. There's a rumor that if you're chosen, you get a pardon. James is taken to another room where he suits up in a hazmat suit and grabs a suitcase. He's disinfected in a corridor before being sent to the surface via an elevator. After walking through underground tunnels, he emerges on a snow-covered earth. James collects bugs and places them in a jar. He is startled by a roaring bear, but it leaves without bothering him. As he continues searching for insects, he ignores the larger animals like birds and lions. Under some snow, he finds a sign with a red monkey and the number 12 on it, along with the message "We did it" soon after. James returns underground, where he's washed thoroughly and given an injection. James is then taken to see the scientists, the leaders of the remaining survivors. They scan his barcode and remind him of his past crimes before tying him to a chair. The scientists know that James has an excellent memory and is very observant, so they want him to travel back in time and find virus samples they can use to create a vaccine. If James succeeds, they'll reduce his sentence and help humanity return to the surface. In 1990, in Philadelphia, a psychiatrist named Catherine is called to a police station where she hears about a strange man who attacked 5 police officers. This man doesn't show up in any records. When Catherine enters the cell, she finds James chained to the floor. His mind is foggy due to the time travel and the beating he received, but he tries to explain that he's on a mission to gather information about an emergency. James mentions the year 1996, but Catherine corrects him, saying it's only 1990. This means the time machine has failed and he's in the wrong year. After Catherine declares that James is mentally unstable, he's sent to an asylum, where he gets another thorough cleaning. A guard introduces James to another patient named Jeffrey and asks him to show James around. As they walk, Jeffrey rants about how the system is broken and how humans are destroying the planet. Later, James is brought before a group of psychiatrists. He loses his temper every time the guards try to restrain him. He tells them about the virus and the 12 monkeys, explaining that he can't change the past because it's already happened. Instead, he's there to help people in the future. Naturally, the doctors don't believe him. James tries to prove his story by making a phone call, but when he dials the number the scientist gave him, it connects to a regular household. He then realizes that, since this is 1990, the number won't connect to the right answering machine yet. That night, James dreams of the airport again. He wakes up and looks out the window, but Jeffrey tells him that the window can't be opened. While Jeffrey starts ranting again, James notices a spider and eats it, thinking it might still be useful as a sample. Jeffrey admits that he knows a way out of the asylum, but he's not going to use it because his rich father will soon get him out. He destroys pillows and is taken away. The next day, James and Jeffrey watch a news report about scientists experimenting on animals. They both think it's cruel, and James wonders if humanity deserves to be destroyed. Jeffrey is surprised but loves the idea. At this point, James is given medication that makes him passive and almost unresponsive. Later, Jeffrey returns with a key he's stolen from a guard and places it in James' hand. He then causes a big commotion, inspiring other patients to act out as well. Although James is still dazed, Jeffrey pushes him out of his chair to force him to act. Moving slowly and stumbling often, James eventually makes it to the door and escapes the main area. James walks down a corridor and meets a guard who turns out to be the future prison warden. The front door is locked, but the guard, not caring about James's escaping, tells him to use the elevator. After taking the elevator, James accidentally sets off an alarm, and the guards quickly come after him. They surround him, and though James fights back, hitting a few guards, he's eventually overpowered. The guards tie him to a stretcher and leave him alone in an isolated room. Meanwhile, Catherine talks to the other doctors, saying she has a strange feeling about James, as if she's seen him before. Their conversation is interrupted by a guard who takes them to the isolated room, but when they get there, James has vanished, even though the room has no windows or exits other than the locked door. James begins dreaming about the airport again, but this time he sees a man with Jeffrey's face running away with a briefcase. Suddenly, James wakes up alone in a room in 2035, where he hears a man with a raspy voice talking nonsense, suggesting he might be in the next cell or just a figment of James' imagination. James is soon taken to meet the scientists, who play a distorted recording about the location of the 12 monkeys. James tells them he didn't send the message and explains that he was sent to the wrong time period. The scientists show him old pictures, and James recognizes Jeffrey among the 12 monkeys. They ask him if he wants to try again, and soon, James is set up for another time jump, with many wires and extra calculations to ensure it's done right this time. Unfortunately, James ends up in the middle of a battle during World War I. The French soldiers, not understanding James, point guns at him and question him. Just then, a bomb explodes nearby, and soldiers bring in a wounded man who turns out to be Jose, James' friend. As a soldier takes a photo, James crawls to Jose, but before they can speak, James is shot in the leg. In extreme pain, he experiences another time jump. In 1996, Catherine is giving a presentation about madness and apocalyptic visions, showing a photo of a soldier from World War I who spoke about a deadly disease that would wipe out humanity. The soldier disappeared during the war, and the photo she uses looks like Jose. After her lecture, Catherine signs books for the crowd and is approached by Dr. Peters, who claims that those warning about the destruction of humanity are the only sane ones, while humans destroying the environment is true madness. Later, Catherine heads to her car but is suddenly grabbed by a man who forces her into the vehicle. The man, claiming he has a gun, orders her to drive him to Philadelphia. Catherine soon realizes the man is James, who apologizes for scaring her and says he needs her help. During the drive, James is excited to experience fresh air and music, something he hasn't enjoyed since he was a child. They hear a news report about a boy trapped in a well, but James isn't concerned, telling Catherine it's just a prank and the boy is hiding in a barn. Meanwhile, Catherine's friends, worried that she's gone missing, alert the police. The authorities search her apartment and find a message from a colleague at the mental hospital warning that James is back and looking for her. Eating at a hotel, James and Catherine take a break. James dreams about the airport again, but this time he sees Catherine as the blonde woman in his visions. When he wakes up, he tells Catherine about the dream but keeps her tied up. He takes her money and heads to a vending machine to get some snacks. While there, he sees on TV that he's now wanted for kidnapping Catherine. Realizing they're in danger, James and Catherine hit the road again. As they drive through Philadelphia, James suddenly spots something. He rushes to a wall and finds graffiti belonging to the 12 Monkeys. Catherine considers using this moment to escape but chooses to follow James, still convinced he's not in his right but wanting to help. As they follow the graffiti, a homeless man with a raspy voice tells them that no one can hide because they are tracking people through devices implanted in their teeth. James and Catherine enter an abandoned theater after ignoring his earlier warning. The theater has become. When he gets close enough, he punches the man in the groin, overpowers him, and smashes his head against the wall. Then, he tackles the second attacker before he can hurt Catherine. James unleashes his rage, brutally beating the man to death. Afterward, James takes the gun from one of the men, and they both rush out of the building. Outside, James spots a pig statue he had seen in pictures from the scientists. This is the base of the Freedom for Animals Association (FIA). Inside the building, James confronts the group, demanding information about the 12 monkeys and threatening them with the gun. The group reveals they used to work with Jeffrey, but distanced themselves when he became radical and started using guerrilla tactics. Jeffrey then founded the 12 Monkeys. They also share that Jeffrey's father, Leland, is a famous virologist who experiments on animals. James finds a photo of Leland while tying up the group and notices an article about Jeffrey releasing 100 snakes in the Senate as a prank. The group also tells him that Jeffrey eventually regretted his actions and began supporting his father's work. James steals an address book from the FAA and forces Catherine to drive him to Leland's mansion in a stolen car. Despite his legs still hurting, James pushes through. When Catherine notices his pain, she stops at a house to steal medical supplies and removes the bullet from his leg. James apologizes, and then they continue to the mansion. At the mansion, James sneaks under a car to hide. As he emerges, he accidentally drops his gun. Inside, Leland is giving a speech at a dinner party, and Jeffrey is there, pretending to be the perfect son, although he's asleep. A guard wakes him up, telling him a strange man claims to know him. Jeffrey investigates and initially acts like he doesn't recognize James. However, when James mentions the 12 Monkeys, Jeffrey changes his mind. He takes James to a private room, where James asks for a virus sample. Jeffrey mistakenly thinks James wants to spread the virus and destroy humanity like he talked about in the asylum. This enrages James, and he attacks Jeffrey, holding him over a railing. Guards rush in to stop James, leading to a fight. During the chaos, Jeffrey begins ranting about the system again. James fights off a few guards and jumps over the railing, startling the dinner guests when he lands. He quickly escapes, with guards chasing after him. In the woods later, James lets Catherine out of the car's trunk, and she attacks him out of frustration. However, she isn't strong enough to harm him. They soon hear the police coming, and Catherine starts honking the car horn to get their attention. Meanwhile, James dances in a nearby pond, enjoying the fresh air, but suddenly disappears. The next morning, Catherine returns home after being questioned by the police. She hears on the news that a missing child was found in a barn, confirming what James had said earlier. It was all a prank. Back in 2035, James wakes up and finds the scientists singing to him in front of a beautiful painting. They tell him he has located the source of Bars and promise him an official pardon and freedom once he's fully recovered. However, the situation feels strange to James and he snaps, accusing them of not being real. He begins to laugh, concluding he must be insane, and the scientists sedate him with an injection. After a while, James up and hears a man with a raspy voice. The man tells him that his real wish is to see the sky, the ocean, and to be with her. James isn't sure if this voice is in his head and wonders if it's the same man with no teeth he saw earlier. In 1996, Catherine struggles to sleep. One morning, she gets a call from a detective who tells her that the bullet from James' wound has been analyzed. The ballistic report shows the bullet was fired before 1920. Catherine gets freaked out, hangs up the phone, and checks her research. She finds a picture from World War I showing James standing next to Jose. Realizing James' story might be true, Catherine calls Leland and warns him that his son will steal the virus, but Leland assures her that their security is strong. Despite that, he tells his assistant Peters to increase security measures just in case. Meanwhile, James tries to convince the scientist to send him back to 1996. He explains that his earlier outburst was because he was feeling sick and insists he's better now. The scientists quiz him on the virus and make him list the locations where it first appeared. James answers everything correctly and notices some pictures of graffiti at the FAA building, which he didn't see when he was there before. Outside the FAA, Catherine is trying to get inside, but the group ignores her. They reveal that Jeffrey is working with them and that they lied to James. Just then, a homeless man with a raspy voice warns Catherine that the police are watching her. Catherine wonders if this is the same man James kept hearing about. When she asks him, the man gets scared and runs away. Feeling desperate, Catherine starts painting the graffiti James saw in the pictures. At that moment, James arrives and tells Catherine that he wants to turn himself in to the police because he now believes he's losing his mind. Catherine pulls him away, but a police officer sees them. Luckily, another car blocks the police and they manage to escape, and they end up at a hotel where Catherine pays for a room for a few hours. The receptionist assumes she's up to something suspicious and calls a local thug to report them. In the hotel room, Catherine shows James the photo of him from World War I, trying to prove everything is real, but James doesn't care anymore. He just wants to live a normal life with her. As Catherine comforts him with a hug, a thug suddenly bursts into the room, accusing her of working on his turf. When she tries to explain, the man punches her and pulls out a knife, grabbing her by the hair. James finally steps in, grabs a phone, and starts beating the man with it. Catherine, scared, begs James not to kill him, so James locks the thug in the bathroom. Catherine is worried when she hears screaming from inside the bathroom. James comes out and reveals that he removed his teeth, just like the homeless man had suggested. By the time the police arrive, James and Catherine have already escaped through the window. Catherine removes her teeth too, and they both take a bus downtown. Catherine uses a payphone to call the number James had tried calling back in 1990. She gets excited when a carpet cleaning company answers, thinking that maybe the virus outbreak is all in James' head, but when she starts reciting the message she left on the machine, James finishes it for her. This confirms to Catherine. While looking around, James realizes that this is the same building where he had taken the bugs from earlier. In the evening, the 12 Monkeys gang is on a bus with someone they have kidnapped, who turns out to be Leland. The doctor tells Jeffrey that he knows about his plan and has taken steps to protect the virus. Jeffrey tells him it's too late, and the group begins making monkey noises as they head toward the zoo. Meanwhile, James and Catherine are hiding in a theater where she glues a fake mustache and wig onto him. James falls asleep while watching the movie and starts dreaming about being at the airport again. When he wakes up, he notices Catherine is gone, but quickly finds her coming out of the bathroom. Interestingly, her new look matches what he saw in his dream. They hug, and later that morning, the city wakes up to find that zoo animals are running loose everywhere. James and Catherine decide to leave the country and catch a cab to the airport. The driver explains that the traffic is worse than usual because of the incident with the 12 monkeys. It turns out that it was James and Catherine who released the animals, not the 12 monkeys. They even spot some giraffes running around and realize this was all part of Jeffrey's plan. This also explains the "We Did It" graffiti they saw earlier. At the airport, the police are distributing James' picture to all employees. As soon as they arrive, James realizes the airport is the exact place from his dream. Catherine heads to the counter to pick up their tickets, while James uses a payphone to send a message to the scientists. He tells them that the 12 monkeys weren't responsible for the virus and that he no longer wants to return to the future. Meanwhile, the man with the suitcase from James' dream is at the front desk, buying tickets to all the places that match James' virus list. James heads to the bathroom to fix his mustache, where he hears a familiar raspy voice from one of the stalls telling him that he can't stay in the present. James yells back that he's already done his part, but when he opens the stall, it's just a scared businessman. As he leaves the bathroom, James runs into Jose, who confirms that the scientist received his message. Jose tries to hand James a gun, but James refuses. Jose then reveals that his mission is to shoot Catherine if James doesn't cooperate. This causes James to snap, and he begins to choke Jose, but eventually he calms down and decides to take the guns. At the same time, young James arrives at the airport with his family. Nearby, Catherine bumps into the man with the suitcase, who turns out to be Peters. After Peters walks away, Catherine spots his picture in the newspaper next to an article about Leland. Realizing something is wrong, she rushes to tell James, and they begin searching for Peters. But Peters is stopped by airport security, who ask him to open his suitcase. He opens one of the vials, pretending it's empty, but he's starting to spread the virus. Meanwhile, Catherine and James are trying to get through the security line, but an argument breaks out when a guard stops them. A police officer notices James and attempts to arrest him, but James punches the officer and rushes through through the metal detector, shoving a guard aside. While Catherine tries to hold back the crowd to buy him more time, young James watches everything unfold. James, now armed with the gun, pulls it out to stop Peters, but before he can take the shot, the police shoot James down. Peters boards the plane, while Catherine runs to James, devastated by what's happened. Young James witnesses his own future death. Before Catherine can fully process the tragedy, the police take her away. On the plane, Peters chats with his fellow passengers, who turn out to be the scientists from the future. Outside in the parking lot, young James watches the plane take off. Subscribe for popcorn. We are racing towards 1,000 subscribers.